apologies for absence.
Chairman, we've received apologies from Councillor John Oswald, also from Councillor Henry Higgins and from Councillor Carol Melvin, and we have Councillor Becky Hagar substituting.
Thank you. Do I have any declarations of interest in matters coming before tonight's meeting? No. Minutes of the previous meeting, before we move them, they are inaccurate. The apologies for absence state that I wasn't here, which is correct, and that Councillor Tuckwell was substituting for me, but as he's the Vice Chairman of Committee, I think that would have been a little difficult. It was actually Councillor Hagar was my substitute that night. I have no. Obviously, I wasn't here, but is any apart from that, are they good? Yeah, everyone's happy. Good. I'll take those as agreed then. Everybody. We're taking the agenda that was published. The only variation I'm making, and it is logical, is that we will take item 10 before item 9. It would be good to look at the new building on the site before we think about the temporary buildings that might still be required. Logical. All items tonight are in part 1 and are in public. So a welcome to what is probably a reduced audience given all the circumstances, and a somewhat spread out room again to try and minimise some contact. And I therefore presume there'll be more people joining us on YouTube than normal, because those who might wish to have joined us will probably see it there. Obviously, usual health and safety. Can I please ask all mobile phones are switched off or to silent, including my own. If we get a fire alarm, we are presuming it's real because there are no drills planned. Fire exit there, fire exit in the corner behind me. In terms of the conduct of tonight's meeting, I only have petitions on the first item. And I suspect the number of people who are planning to speak to us may have changed. So let me outline what we were planning to do, and then we'll see how many people are actually here. Members have all had the fairly bulky pack of documents and the plans. In terms of petitions get 5 minutes to address us. 4 green, 1 amber. When you get to red, you're done. Ward councillors have a right to address us on any item, but I presume the only one we're likely to hear something on again is item 6, I suspect. Members may ask some questions and they may not. Now, we had 4 petitions on item 6. I had already, as I'm allowed to do, ruled that we were going to take them in 2 bundles, because 2 relate to kind of what services might be provided within this building, and that is a matter over which this planning committee has limited or no jurisdiction, and the others related to highways, parking and other issues. So that was what I was going to do. Just as a quick check so I know where we're going with this, in case it's changed since my officers did the checks earlier, how many people are here intending to speak on the West Drayton Youth Centre? Right, hang on, we've got rather a lot of people now. That's too many people, I suspect. Are you speaking as a ward councillor? Or yes. I gathered he might be. Okay, fine. So are you 3 sharing the petition times? Or
2 of us are sharing the petition. We've been told that there's 10 minutes for the 4 petitions.
There is 10 minutes for the 4 petitions? Yes, 2 5s effectively was the way I had it in my head, because I like to do life simply. Okay, right. So we're all on the same page.
We do have a short statement.
I have a short statement to read from another petition as well, but I'll manage that in addition to the time, because it's too complicated to do anything else. Okay, good. So I think we're fairly clear what we're doing. The committee is, as everyone has seen, is a couple of members down tonight, owing to the virus situation. Voting members of committee tonight, on my left, Councillor Duncan and Councillor Morse, and on my right, Councillor Tuckwell, Councillor Goddard, Councillor Haggett and Councillor Morgan. We have an even number as well tonight. That always makes life interesting. Should we manage a tie, I get a casting vote. Other than that, I don't cast a vote in this matter. The officer team tonight, Alan Tilley is handling highways matters for us. Zanab Haj Ishmael is one of the presenters, Mandip Malhotra is the other, and they're doing a kind of double act over there, so we'll let them work out what they do between them. James Rogers, the head of planning, obviously gives us advice. Kerry Munro is our legal officer, and Liz Penny is my clerk. That is everybody. There's no feedback forms out tonight, so we're good. Oh, they're on the table, are they? They've become yellow, not orange as well. Okay, officers, whoever's presenting me with item 6, the leisure centre, could they...
Thank you, Chairman. Item number 6 is the Useley and West Drayton Leisure Centre on Harmondsworth Road. If I take you through the planning application, the proposal seeks the redevelopment of the land identified in red on this application site. So you'll notice that there is a road that runs through the development site, and then there is an area which is effectively public highway here. So the land to the north currently comprises of the youth centre, and the land to the south comprises of the family centre. The site lies within the West Drayton Conservation Area, close to the Dell Public Open Space and the West Drayton Cemetery Allotment Site. The site is also within an archaeological priority area, and as I've mentioned, whilst it's a conservation area, it does not comprise any listed buildings, and there are no listed buildings within the vicinity of the site. So the existing site plans identify the existing facilities on the 2 portions of land. So on the north, as I've mentioned, is the youth centre, and to the south, a family centre, which also comprises of a vehicle repair unit. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the demolition of these buildings, which are the existing buildings on the site, to provide a Part 2 and a Part 3-storey building on the northern land to provide a community leisure centre. The land to the south is proposed to provide a decked car park, providing 199 car parking spaces. I identified earlier that there is some ancillary land included, which is highway land, and that's this area strip here, and that would be a dedicated coach drop-off bay to facilitate coach parties visiting the community leisure centre. Alongside the proposals are also works to provide a pedestrian crossing to provide safe access from both the coach bay and the car park over and across into the leisure centre. I'll take you through the proposed plans. There is proposed to be a basement, and that's primarily to facilitate the swimming pool, which is proposed as part of the leisure centre development. The ground floor plan shows the main pool area in the far northern corner, and then ancillary facilities such as climbing walls. There is a creche to the north of the site, and this is a sort of soft play and a cafe ancillary area. Moving up the building, there are some multifunctional spaces. So we have a youth zone, some internal courts, as well as on the top floor a football pitch, which would be enclosed within the building, but would also have screening to prevent noise and illumination spill. The proposals are for full planning permission for both parts of the site, so to the north and to the south. This is the roof plan, which shows the proposed PV panels and also the void of land, the voided roof above the sports pitch. The elevations are shown here in 2 different forms. So one with the trees which exist on site and are proposed to be retained, and one without the trees. So it's trying to provide you with an accurate reflection of what the development will look like post-completion, but we don't want to hide the fact that the built form will look like that behind the tree coverage. This is the western elevation, the northern elevation, which also comprises the green wall, and the southern elevation. We take you through to some detailed plans. We do have some details of the proposed fenestration for the leisure centre building. I would note that whilst the plans do show a certain colour and finish of the proposed tiles for the building, the Conservation Officer has requested a specific and bespoke condition, which is noted in your plan pack as condition number 6, in order to provide, in order to get more details and finalise the actual colour finish, because we prefer something more muted in this conservation area location. So it will be subject to further approval, and it's very unlikely to have the colour finishes that are shown on these plans. We take you through a detailed section of the building, and then the cycle store, which is proposed to be located. I know some have mentioned that it's not very clear from the plans, but it's actually here, to the left of the leisure centre building. So there is a service road which runs off Rowley's Place into the development site, and the cycle store is just off the service road. This is a cross-section showing the car park. One of the things to note is that there is a significant change in levels at the site, therefore the actual visible element of built form will be minimised as a result of the change in levels. I believe it's approximately 2 metres of a fall. This is the proposed landscape plan and the street elevation, providing some context with the wider trees and foliage. These are visuals of the proposed building. As I've already said, we're not going to be approving the colours, and the visuals generally don't form part of an approval pack, but this is just more for your information purposes in considering the proposals. If I take you through some of the plans. So this is the West Drayton Cemetery allotment site, the front elevation. This is a view of Rowley's Place, site looking east, the existing family centre which will be removed, the family centre again. This is a view from Harmondsworth Road again, and the Young People Centre, and this is a view from Dell Road. Again, the youth centre from Harmondsworth Road, and more images of the youth centre. I take you back to a proposed site plan, so sorry to be flicking back and forward. There we go. So the proposal does not result in the loss of community facilities. Some of the objections that we have received, my presentation will mainly focus on looking at some of the objections that we've received for the proposals, were the loss of the family centre, the motor vehicle workshop, and also the family centre, the youth centre. There are proposals in place to relocate all of those existing facilities to other locations. So the existing youth centre would be re-provided within the leisure centre, and it's the family centre that will now move into the civic centre. The workshop will also be relocated to a suitable site within West Drayton. These are part of strategic proposals which are technically outside of planning, but we are confident that with the provisions we have in place with the relocation of the family centre and the youth centre, that there is no loss of community facilities as a result of the proposals. The site is, however, located within a conservation area, and you will note that the Council's Conservation Officer deems that the proposals result in less than substantial harm, which is a definitional term from the National Planning Policy Framework. When this assessment is made, by virtue of having that definition and classification of less than substantial harm, policy directs that the Council should consider if less than substantial harm is outweighed by the public benefits. Page 55 and 56 of your committee report identify the clear public benefits that outweigh the less than substantial harm that's been identified to the conservation area designation. We've been through the palette of materials. If we move on to highways concerns, which have been noted from various objections from the petitioners, we are proposing to provide a dedicated 199 space 2-storey car park, so that's located on the southern part of the site. This level of provision, so the 199 spaces, is akin to other leisure centres within the borough, and therefore we feel confident that the provision is adequate to serve the leisure centre facility. In order to alleviate larger groups and trips, the dedicated coach bay has been proposed, which I'm indicating on the plans now. This will seek to drop passengers off at that location rather than those larger vehicles needing to enter Rowley's Place. So careful consideration has been given to larger vehicles not being needed to enter into Rowley's Place because there would be insufficient space to turn. If we then move on to how we then get users over to the leisure centre facility, we are proposing a pedestrian crossing which will allow visitors from the southern part of the site to cross over Rowley's Place and enter into the leisure centre building. In addition, and to prevent the community leisure centre users moving into the residential area of Rowley's Place, which is this area here, there is a proposal for a physical curb build-out. This is subject to detailed design and proposals, but effectively the build-out, which is indicated on the plan just here, would allow only one vehicle to pass at a time. It is proposed in order to provide a visual barrier to prevent any of the leisure centre users entering into Rowley's Place unnecessarily. They should be turning directly into the leisure centre car park, either left or right, depending on whether they're needing disabled parking spaces. There is also notional intentions for a, we called it parking management scheme. Sorry, I still refer to it as a CPZ. But no, a parking management scheme which effectively restricts other users, apart from those who have the relevant permits, to park within Rowley's Place. This is subject to a different process, but we believe that we can touch on that later. The application has been recommended for approval. However, I would like to request one verbal update with regard to the committee recommendation. So if we turn to page 10, the committee recommendation number 6, which relates to the mitigation required for the basement and the potential flooding implications, we would like delegated authority to tighten up the wording of what that actually refers to in order to get greater clarity that we are trying to seek off-site mitigation or on-site mitigation to alleviate any flooding concerns as a result of the application. There is also an addendum, if I didn't mention that earlier, on this item, which is simply clarifying plan numbers and tidying up some of the conditions. Thank you.
Okay, James, please.
If I may just make 2 very quick comments, because it is a very long report. Firstly, your officers do consider it is a high quality design, the proposal. And the second point I wanted to make is just following on flood and water management. There are a number of conditions as well as a head of terms. So in effect, in simple terms, what officers are seeking to do is to ensure that all the flood and water management implications are fully dealt with. But the point I would make is it's quite a complex building project. So as the project develops, part of the intention of having a 106 is effectively bolt and braces to ensure all the flood and water management issues are fully dealt with. It's definitely the intention of officers to ensure through this, should members agree with the recommendation, that all the flood and water management impacts are fully dealt with. That's the point I'd emphasise. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, petitioners, who's going first?
We might have to go together.
Well, go on. Just,
I need something from my hand.
well, as long as of that microphone, and we will start the timers, and if you speak clearly into the microphone, then it picks it up for the YouTube.
Would it be okay because the other 2 petitions that we here, we're going to migrate most of it together?
Can you put your microphone on, so we've got that on the... Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, because the other 2 petitions are not here, is it okay to migrate all the comments together, or would you...
Well, you can if you want. Obviously, it depends how much of the time Councillor Sweeting wants for her speech.
Well, she's not part of the petitioner, so...
Are you speaking as a ward councillor?
Yeah.
Right, that's fine. That's neat and tidy. I get that. Away you go.
So
I've got one small bit to read from one of your petitioners, but I will do that outside the timing, just to make my life easy.
So we'll be talking about the access, the library, and...
So I will give you up to 10 minutes to tell us what you want to say. But you'll have to cover all the petition items within that time if you're speaking on behalf of everybody. Away you go.
Okay. As a resident, I've been there over 20 years, and I've been a Hillingdon resident for all my life, so 45 years something. And I totally agree with this development. I think it's a fantastic idea in principle, because I used to go to St Matthew's School, and I had a swimming pool there, and it was brilliant as a child. Now my daughter is 5 and she needs it. So what we don't agree with as residents, and what is disappointing to us all, is the fact that you're using Rowley's Place as an entrance point. It's the access to the main Harmonsworth Road is just, at the best of times, as a resident trying to get out of that road, it's not easiest to do. And to join a main road from a small road is quite difficult. As you see, we're just two little cul-de-sac roads, so it's not like we have any other option. As you can see, if you further on past where the coach stops are, Harmondsworth Road splits into two, and one road becomes the Brambles and Wise Lane. That junction is very, very close, so I cannot understand how the council are saying that there is no possible means of moving the entrance for the car park straight onto Harmondsworth Road. It's a much safer and safer. Yeah, it's safe for everybody, not just for users, also for other drivers on the main road. And there is no real, it's a contradiction in what you've already got in place. And we understand that there is a slope in the road. It does in Rowley's Place, so the car park will go underneath. If no tenders have been given out, I cannot understand how the council are saying that they can't justify the additional costs. If nothing's been put out, how do you know it's going to cost any extra to move the entrance, instead of Rowley's Place, move it to Harmondsworth Road, have the entrance of the car park coming straight onto the top level and drive down a level and have parking spaces underneath? The top should be straight in par with Harmondsworth Road. It's just a matter of piling in proper supports. There's no difference from that to, and then having the entrance into Rowley's Place is causing not undue stress onto residents and pedestrians. My daughter is at a local school. We walk most of the time. Now, I'm concerned that this development, is going to take 2 to 3 years. I think the latest report is up to 3 years. So this is a minute road. You saw it, how small it is. And if you can't even have coaches turning down there, how are we as residents going to be able, how's the council going to mitigate any inconvenience to us? We're worried about the mess on the road. We've had Wise Lane mud and rubbish being travelled around. So now we know what the situation is going to be like. But why can we not have the access on the main road so that we avoid all the dirty cars as driving, as residents, as taking the bus, people walking to school? We're going to be walking on muddy paths. The road cannot be swept each and every day and kept clean for us. There is no conceivable way that it can be in our health and safety. People are going to trip, there's mud, there's going to be slime, there's going to be debris from the trucks. I'm just waiting for an accident to happen, basically, if that's going to happen. Also, the 2 coach stops, although in theory it looks lovely, it's a nice long road, we know that there are travellers that come to the cemetery there, they park their cars up the road. That is going to be used by them. It's absolutely horrendous as it is, and the coach stops there. If a child is coming out of school, my daughter is 5 years old, she's coming off that coach stop, she has to run up, it's raining, you know what children are like in the rain, they're going to run, there's going to be a slip hazard, there's teachers going to be looking after 20, 40, 60 children, they've got to walk all the way up there, then turn into Rowley's Place, then go in. Why can we not have the entrances for both the car park and for the leisure centre, coming straight out? And I understand you've got trees there and you were showing pictures of lovely trees, but all those trees are not there. I don't think you've got the most recent up to date where they've been cutting back trees. There's quite a big gap, so a path could be made so that it's coming straight up to Harmondsworth Road. It doesn't need to go onto Rowley's Place. I don't even know why this concept was made. I think better service would be where Rowley's Place would have only access for 2 coaches. So 2 coaches could come in and have disabled bays where you've got the entrance now. Have a disabled bay path going up, because my friend, her daughter is, she's disabled, she's in a wheelchair. I couldn't see her coming into that car park, then trudging across the road, then going in there. The parking bays you've got, but you could make that accessible for coaches only and people with disabilities. It would be better use of space. It's just a few adjustments that you need to make. And I know you're probably saying it's going to cost us, but we as taxpayers, I pay my council tax direct debit every month for tens of years. Why can't we not adjust this? You council are borrowing money to pay for this development. It's not money that you've got in the kitty already. So if you're borrowing money, would it not serve us better to borrow another 100,000 and move the access to a much safer place, save children running across the street, save them being in danger, because then not only are they running across this main Harmondsworth Street, they're crossing Rowley's Place. As a resident, I'm trying to get out of Rowley's Place to go shopping, to take my daughter to school. People are going to work, and what, are we going to have to wait there at a zebra crossing for like 15 minutes while all these children get across? It's not that we don't want to, but it's not feasible. It's just undue stress, and the council hasn't taken any consideration into this. And then also the parking. You said the youth centre is going to be moved into a room there. That youth centre at the moment is a free service to these children. We really need something. Everything is shut down for these poor children. And as we're having the park access there, we know what children hang around and what they do and what they don't do. But if you now say, okay, fine, we've got this lovely leisure centre, you can use computers there, you can use the new game facilities there, it's not going to be free of charge. There will be a cost to these children. These children cannot afford it. They cannot pay for it. So if you're asking them to pay for computer games and a games room and what have you, where's the money going to come from? So they're not going to be able to use the facilities that you've moved the the youth centre to, if it's, you know, if they can't afford it. Why? Now here they're learning skills. The car mechanic place. There is no place. This development and the council planning has been going on for how many months? Almost a year, as far as we know. And in that time, no proper proposal for the youth centre has been made. Usually it was supposed to be used as a swimming pool. Now it's going to be flats, it's going to be that. Fine, do that, but at least say we allocate a part of that land for the youth centre. At least then we can be put at ease that, you know, it's not a total loss for the local community. There is nothing for the young people to do. Also, also we'd like that space to be used as a library. I, again, as a local resident, have used that library that's further up on the High Street. Is very small. It has literally 5 parking spaces and 1 disabled bay, which on a Tuesday morning...
We are down to 2 minutes,
oh, okay.
just to keep you on track. I don't know what your colleagues got to say.
Okay, and then all right, we've also got very grave concerns about the operating hours. 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. If you're saying the shutters are going to be almost onto Rowley's Place, my friend here lives on is the very first house. At 6 a.m. before 6 a.m. she's going to be waking up to shutters. 11 a.m. she's having the shutters shut down on her. If you'd move that shutters and the access to the front of onto the main road, the noise pollution will be diminished. We have to think about the noise that's going to be coming from all these additional cars. You saw the road is very quiet. Everybody knows that children play on those streets. We have no concerns because they're 2 little cul-de-sacs. Nobody speeds down there. People that are not new to that area, they don't know that there are children playing on the streets. There are children on their bicycles. Nobody knows that. It's very often, so much so that we had an accident. A woman didn't know the area. She was just driving furthest into Rowley's Place, and she went straight, instead of turning, all she had to do was turn left. She didn't know the road. She got panicked. She drove into somebody's garage, knocked a 2-double garage down. Sorry.
Yes, one last thing. I hope I can finish my idea in time. I am talking about the narrowing of the road. I am absolutely against it with my residents because it will cause further traffic, and you have the zebra crossing where you have to stop, and then you have the narrowing of the road. This is something that we definitely don't want. I understand why it was suggested, but it's not a solution for us.
Especially if you have a wide car as well.
Yeah, that would delay the services, the emergency services. It will have an impact on the local environment. The change of speed profiles and in some circumstances can lead to higher emissions and noise levels. And changes in speed have been shown to bring about changes in injury and incidents. Also, it affects cyclists and motorcyclists. They will try to overtake each other. This will cause further accidents. And the congestion, not to mention, you will have to stop. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm going to be generous and leave the other bit before I do that, do members have any questions? And I forgot my microphone this time. Yeah, I know. Even I forget. Nope, no hands. That's okay. So thank you very much. We will pick up and address your concerns in a moment, but members haven't got any direct questions for you, so you can go back to where you are. I'll invite the ward councillors forward in a moment. The last bit I promised to read on behalf of the petitioner If that refers to the library, it says, my petition is about placing the library within the plans for the leisure centres. The one in Station Road is not fit for purpose. I'm sure people in the area would benefit from having state-of-the-art and up-to-date library to use. I'd always also encourage more people to get fit and read. If you're going to put us through 2 years of grief of building works, please consider our input. We believe Hillingdon Borough Council have already decided they're not going to listen to us, and they wish to put their ideas forward. It's a summary of that. Who's going first from the councillors? Who's?
Can we come up together?
If you do, yeah, I'm entirely welcome. If you wish to do joint efforts, you're entirely welcome to do it. Give him 6. I will, on the basis of the 2 councillors, I would have allowed 3 minutes each for councillors in accordance with the Constitution. I will double it and put 6 on the clock. Well, then it saves me messing about and you trying to work it out. So on that basis, as you were planning to speak for no more than 3 between you, no doubt you'll be within 6. How's that?
Whilst welcoming the Council's decision to recognise the substantial shortfall in community facilities in West Drayton, the area will in fact be losing 2 facilities alongside one already lost in Useley. The area is indeed in significant deficit of facilities to serve its hugely expanded population, which this development will indeed go some way in meeting up the vast shortfall. Although welcomed by the majority of West Drayton residents, the development would impact severely on local residents who will have their lives changed forever, as Rowleys and Stainby will cease to be quiet cul-de-sacs, but will be on a route of many hundreds of vehicles accessing and leaving the centre before 6 in the morning until after 11 at night. So I do ask for the following to be considered by the committee. 1, that the entrance to the car park should come from Harmondsworth Road and not Rowleys. Not easy, but it could be done. That the hours of operation be reduced to, say, 7 in the morning to 10:30 at night. That an informal consultation of residents takes place without the need for a petition on a parking management scheme, for local roads will indeed be used by clients of the centre not wanting to pay the parking fee. That even more tree planting and screening is provided to shield local residents, leaving some of them only 27 metres away, from the noise on the roof, the lights on the roof, from the football pitch on the roof, as it will be as the development will indeed be a bulky development of considerable height, which is actually recognised as being of identified harm by the conservation officer, and also that more mitigation against the increased air pollution caused by idling traffic be investigated in this already heavily polluted air quality management area. I want to say something in addition now about the youth centre and the number of cars that the report suggested went into the youth centre. Now the youth centre, because of reductions in hours, is used very sparingly now, so I'm not clear that the number of cars that's been used accessing Rowleys into the youth centre is actually relevant. And I would also remind the committee of policy 3.6 of the London Plan, which says there should be no loss of community facilities. And although we have extra here, we will lose the very good youth centre, which is used by very vulnerable youngsters who are not able to access other facilities in the area. And the fact that the workshop is also not identified as yet is a facility that is very well used. And so I would ask that the facilities that are suggested in the youth zone are just not suitable. And my colleague Stuart will be able to provide more information on that.
Thank you. I also welcome this amenity in West Drayton and for Useley as well. We're all in agreement that it's, in principle, a very good idea. And besides the access issues and concerns around noise, there is a slight class use. I know it's still a D class, but there is a slight class use that's proposed within this. And my understanding is as well of the intention of the London Plan and our plans is that with community facilities, that we make sure that we're not detrimenting the population. And although we are providing a much greater sports offer within this facility, we aren't providing like for like, not in terms of space, but in terms of what is on offer within the youth facility currently, and then moving into the youth zone. So in my mind, there is a small group space, or several small group spaces, training rooms. There are music production spaces. Dance studios, I would expect, would be in the leisure centre, and sports outdoor and indoor facilities would be in the leisure centre. But there's missing that flexibility for young people to do different things outside of the sports offer within the local area through the youth club, which they can currently do, which wouldn't be in the new provision. Equally, young people have ownership over the space they have currently, that they work with youth workers and groups that use it. They have a lot of ownership, computer access, and they shape how these services run. Unfortunately, in this and in the report, I didn't see any engagement with young people as to what they might want within a youth zone or a youth space. Hopefully that will follow. We also have had a similar struggle in West Drayton in terms of consultation, where there hasn't been quite enough for residents to really talk through and understand what there is, and not much of that has been in West Drayton. There has been a little bit more in Useley, and although the statutory minimum may have been required, the input of residents, and young people particularly, has been overlooked slightly. We're looking effectively at using maybe the youth zone space as an alternative use, such as a library. There are multi-purpose rooms next door, there are plenty of those, and my fear is that this multi-purpose room will go either a sports offer, a non-youth bit. So I'd ask that you condition that it has a youth purpose only, or an alternative provision such as a library, and that the council planners, etc., are tasked to find an alternative provision for the youth centre, so it could be an independent space with a separate independent entrance. That's what young people currently have. The marginalised young people, those that use it, have a separate entrance that's accessible. And within the plans, from what I can see, they would have to go through the normal route, which could put some young people off who are marginalised and on the edge of our service provision and slightly disengaged. So I'd ask that we wouldn't lose a facility by replacing one with another, but have either or and both in terms of a youth facility. Yes, that's fine.
Members have any questions? No hands, so I take that as good. I'm going to ask the head of planning to comment in a moment. I'm just going to deal with some of the issues, and I wasn't quite certain whether the council's reference to the London plan was the current London plan or the draft. So the current one that exists, or the new draft? It's the old one. The adopted, good, because the new draft London plan has some difficulties, and we're not considering it at the moment because it has currently been rejected by the Secretary of State, so therefore it gives us some problems. Okay, in relation, I'm going to deal with one matter now, just so I make it clear and don't forget. In terms of, this committee has no power, as the officer indicated, to mandate residents' parking schemes. They are subject to overall engagement with residents and consultation, and will only be implemented if that process deems that is what the majority of residents want. What I have agreed with Councillor Burrows, within whose portfolio this falls, is that should this application be agreed tonight, that the current petition that has been submitted will be transferred to him. So in other words, residents won't need to go again. He will hear that. They'll need to go and talk to him about it, but he will hear that as a scheme, as a petition for residents' parking, to avoid residents having to go out and get themselves a whole new petition. So I've done that for you. That's as far as I can take residents' parking, and I will direct committee to look at highways issues, but obviously residents' parking they can't look at. Perhaps the head of planning would offer me some comment, in particular around the uses, I think, would be useful. And any other matters you wish to...
If I could start with highways, because there was quite a lot of mention of highways.
Well, I was going to let the highways officer do that.
Well, it's just in a more general sense. So this authority does have a number of leisure centres at the moment. Two of them are access off cul-de-sacs. So there's Gatling Way, the Hillingdon Sport and Leisure Complex. Hume Way is the High Grove in Eastcote. Now, part of my remit as the public and members will be aware is actually I'm head of planning and transportation, so I get copied into emails and all the communications on traffic hotspots and areas where there's problems. And what I was going to say is the reason I don't hear anything about Gatling Way or Hulme Way is because leisure centre uses, the activity is throughout the day, so the impacts are sort of spaced out. Whereas you have other uses that members will be familiar with, such as schools, where there's a concentration of traffic movements. And I think that's quite an important point when considering, yes, this may seem a big proposal with a car park with 199 spaces, but it's important to note that those movements are dissipated throughout the day, and that means that in terms of the complexities of traffic, of impacts on junctions and such like, it means that the amount of queuing is substantially reduced compared with a different type of use that would have concentrations in certain peak hours. Although obviously the Councillor's Highway Engineer can comment in a lot more detail. This proposal was subject to a lot of pre-application discussion. It's in a conservation area, so that's actually the starting position, and the first thing we noted is there was high-value trees, so actually the applicant was steered towards a layout that avoided removal of high amenity value trees, because the two existing buildings make very limited contribution architecturally to the conservation area. It's the trees that actually are the important factor in terms of the conservation area. So to answer the point of why can't the access be moved, the council's planning officers would object due to the impact on trees is the simple answer. I'm conscious there's a point being raised, or is there gaps, and but I'm afraid that's my answer. And an awful lot of bits of the layout were dictated by input from the council as a borough culturist and trees and landscape officer. In terms of the use, condition 5 is quite important. I don't know the answer to all the sort of points being raised regarding how the use zone would operate, but condition 5 requires more details to be submitted. I know the officers here do know a bit more about the details, but I'd go back to the point that condition 5 actually, I think, in part addresses some of the points being raised, in that the details need to be submitted and agreed at a later date. So, Chairman, I think have I covered your points, or is there more? No. Okay, I'll stop there, because I know there's a panel of officers here that have more specific details.
Well, I'm going to put it up to members to start this thing off, and then we'll. I've got some things I want answered in a minute, but I was going to see where the members go for me. Councillor Tuckwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so I'd like to thank the petitioners, all councillors, for their comments this evening. I really welcome this scheme. I think it's of great benefit not only to Hillingdon but particularly to residents of West Drayton and Useley. The original question I had was around the highways, but I think Head of Planning has covered that off quite nicely. Question I did have was around car park security and what we're doing around securing the car park, certainly out of hours or during times of, towards the end of the operation. We have had examples elsewhere in the borough where we've had incursions or car meets, and is there anything in place to secure that?
Who wants to take that one? Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you. So in terms of security, yes, that has been considered. There's boundary treatment, and we have a condition for landscaping boundary treatments. There's a secured by design condition. The Metropolitan Police were consulted as part of the pre-application process, and they commented on the application. They've raised no objection. They've looked at this very carefully because they want to avoid any problems down the line. In terms of how it will be secured in the evening, there will be shutters that will secure the car park, so it's not used for donating and so on. And that will come down. It will be closed by 11 p.m. So we'd expect the reason why the time is 11 and not 10 o'clock. The leisure centre itself will open up until 10 o'clock, but it's the staff that are servicing the leisure centre that may want to finish off and then leave, and it will be for those purposes. That is why it's 11 o'clock and not 10.
So just to add and this is a feature of other leisure centres, when you have a swimming pool, the elite swimmers like to go there early in the morning. So the reason there's a 6 o'clock start isn't because it's going to be, this is based on the other leisure centres, so it's just not me being hypothetical. Based on our council's other leisure centres, you'd envisage between 6 and 7 you'll have the elite swimmers there, and they tend to be small in number. You're not going to have the volumes you'd have at busier times of the day. Just one other point. Members over the years will be aware that I do sometimes, when I listen to petitioners, try and think if there's any extra conditions that might go some way to address comments of the petitioners. There was a reference to lighting. There isn't the automatic light switch-off condition currently in the report. I know members have done this with schools where lighting technology is such that you can have it that when the room is vacant, the lights go off, and there's all sorts of things you can do. So members want effectively sophisticated lighting installed that automatically switches off when basically it is no longer required. That can be added as a condition, and I'd be quite happy to recommend that you add it given the scale of the proposal and the fact that lighting, I think I'm right saying, was mentioned at one point.
Okay. As we go, Councillor Goddard, and then Councillor Duncan, and then Councillor Morse. So I'll do that way around, and then I won't forget anyone.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm mindful of what officers said about the materials to be used to this building, and I appreciate that probably the visuals are illustrative only. But I have to say that looking at particularly the western elevation of that building, which is the one that looks out into the residential area, and if you see that unprotected by trees, as I understand it would be at the moment, the impact can only be described as horrid. And so I would ask whether, I appreciate that there is a condition there that says that the finish of the material should be considered. I wonder if we can give a slightly stronger steer in terms of actually toning down the colour of these materials. I think the effect of this design is actually quite oppressive when you remove the trees.
I may have an idea that may be welcomed by the councillor. So there is planning policies that encourage green walls because they have a whole raft of benefits. So if members want to, it would. In normal practices, you don't sort of redesign something, but if you can deal with something simply through a planning condition, and this would be a simple matter, if members so wish to require an element of green wall, that's something I think you could, within your remit, to condition if you think that's justified and addresses a concern. And I'm conscious that climate change and everything's on everyone's agenda, so we could easily, in terms of the mechanics is that you have to have a reason for a condition. I can definitely come up with reasons in this case if members want to go down that path.
So I'm scribbling to make sure I don't miss the bits as we're going through. If we get to the, if this goes positive, I need to do a summary at the end to make sure I don't forget. And my memory sometimes doesn't remember.
Well, can I say that I very much welcome this development. It's something that local residents widely have asked for a number of years in Useley, West Drayton and Heathrow Villages area as well. Having said that, I do appreciate that if it's literally in the road, the access is in the road where you live, of course you're going to have concerns about that. And I don't take those points that were made lightly. They were serious points, and I think we should try and accommodate them as far as we possibly can. But in terms of this overall provision, I think it would be very much welcomed by the majority of people, certainly in that area. I do agree with Councillor Goddard. It looks so grim. I call all this sort of stuff that's come in austerity architecture. It's not pleasing. It's not, you know, we're in a conservation area. We don't want this kind of brutalist colour scheme, which literally it does look like some prison or something. So I would welcome and support, you know, the suggestion of a green wall if other members of committee think that. For a start, I think it's much more pleasant if you're looking out on an area of greenery, and it will also provide oxygen as well, which we all know we need particularly in this area. The thing that I was going to ask for more detail about was the rooftop football, because it's open air, I understand, and there is quite a noise reading, and so there will be noise. It says the noise is acceptable, but what hours is it going to be open to? And lights, because if this could operate up until 10 o'clock at night, or whatever, I know it says 11 o'clock, but for, you know, staff to get out and close down the facility, that can be quite disturbing if you've got lights up there for people to play in, you know, nice evenings. And so you're going to have this facility at the top lit up, making a noise quite late at night and quite close to residential properties. And I know that it's on the northern side, it's on the part of the site that's closest to the road, it's just south of the existing community centre, which is being retained, but there are properties not that far away. So could we just have some further clarification about the effect that noise readings and possible light pollution would have on those residents, please?
Yeah, go on, Zanab.
So we have discussed this at length, and the very first pre-application meeting with the design team, I did raise this. And so we have looked at lighting very carefully, because I did raise a point about light spillage, that we didn't want it in, especially in a conservation area. So the proposal is for these downlit. Apparently they're very sophisticated, and there's new technology available where the areas that would be lighted would be concentrated just on the pitch, and it wouldn't create the spillage. Notwithstanding, there is a condition, it does say until 11, but our understanding is that the football pitch and so on will close by 10 at the very latest. So I would expect all the lights to close at that point. But if it's for members' comfort, if you think it would be more appropriate, we will condition or add that point that the football pitch must be open no later than 10 o'clock, or it must be closed by 10. Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, sorry.
So I was just going to say, condition 23, it may not have been answered as clear as perhaps it could have been earlier. So it's saying that the leisure centre is open till 10 o'clock, but then members of staff until 11 o'clock. So there shouldn't be football going on at 10 past 10.
I think it's also making sure I think the lighting switch off condition will help us.
Just to also add, condition 34 does cover your concern. So this is prior to above groundworks, isolux diagrams and illumination calculations will be required, and that's for all external lighting, but that also includes this football pitch, because we anticipated this issue.
Thank you very much for that. I'm not at all familiar with isolux diagrams and illumination calculations.
I'm sure somebody will be in a minute.
But as long as there is sufficient in here that the lighting levels are not going to be obtrusive or damaging to the amenity of residents, then I would be happy that there's control over that feature. And should residents experience light pollution, that they can then approach us, and we would have the means to enforce that through this condition.
And also the other one we were going to add,
yes,
regarding the lighting being switched off.
Yes, the lighting being switched off.
That's the other critical bit.
Yes, and I think the fact that it's only going to be open for people actually coming to use the facilities until 10 o'clock. Does that mean then that they can use facilities until 10 o'clock, or they must be out by 10 o'clock?
They must be out by 10 o'clock.
So if you're swimming or something, you've got to get out at 9:30 or 10. Or
so the public got to be off the premises by 10.
Yeah.
It's what the condition says. That's the exact reading of it.
That's clear.
Sorry, Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We welcome in principle this development. I have some reservations about the youth centre aspect. We lose the youth centre, and it's not completely clear to me from the report what we gain, but that's a management issue I would regard. I would take that view. What I will ask a question on is access. The residents have raised this issue of not having an access from Harmondsworth Road, and if you look at the site, you could consider having two accesses. And I don't know whether this has been modelled or looked at. What I'm thinking of, most people, 25% of the people will be coming from this direction, and they could turn left here. Yeah, I know I'm thinking about a sort of more rather than one fixed point of entrance. You may have a one-way or two. I'm not going to argue about that, but I think it's something we should look at, how the car flows into this car park. I think that is something we should get some answers from the traffic officer on, because that was raised by the residents.
I had it held on my outstanding list anyway, so you just got there before me.
And I think that's something I'd like to ask questions on. And the second point is, I totally agree with Councillor Goddard. When I saw that, I went, ooh, I don't like it very much. And I think we can, and I take the view that we should condition it. I'll leave it open to any suggestions you'd like to put in, but I think that's something we should take up.
Yeah, I mean we'll talk about the conditioning of the colour palette in a minute, because I've got that held out. I know the green walls will help it significantly, but yeah, I would share members' views on the colour palette when I saw it. Right, the Highways Officer's been sitting quietly, unless Nab's doing all the work tonight. Can we have a view, please, on... We've explained why the building is... The head of plans very clearly explained why the building is where it is in relation to trees, and I get that. I think members' question is more about why can't there be an access off the Harmondsworth Road, if I paraphrased it very correctly.
Thank you, Chairman. The existing access and arrangements will be subject to detailed design and then a road safety audit. Myself, I'm not trying to dodge the question. I'm the highways engineer that assesses the designs that are put in front of me. It would be for somebody else to go away and design a scheme, as you suggest, that I could then assess.
That wasn't quite the answer I was seeking.
I can just help you with that as well. So this was again one of the first concerns I raised following the petitions and the objections I received from residents, and I asked the question, why can't a entrance or an exit be accommodated off Harmondsworth Road? The reason why it can't is because of the level change. It is quite significant, and I know that there's been a suggestion for a bridge, but they have explored this carefully, and this is the most feasible solution.
I think just to add that if there were an access from Harmondsworth Road, the coach drop-off bays, which are trying to alleviate masses of vehicles coming on site, to try and condense them into coach vehicles, could also not be facilitated in its current form. Harmondsworth Road itself is fairly busy, so directing traffic directly out onto it from the car park is probably not going to pass a road safety audit in its own right for a 199 vehicle car park. I can't guarantee that. As Alan just said, he would need to have the information in front of him in order to assess the impact.
I could go on. We have looked at the development as presented, and first of all we need to consider the number of trips that would be generated by the existing use if it was fully occupied. I note that it's got workshops and offices and meeting rooms, and we calculate that would count. We forecast that in the worst period, that would be in the PM peak, that would be the worst hour during the day. As the head of planning said, trips would be spread all over the day, but the worst would be in the PM peak. Now, the existing use would generate 67 trips. With the leisure centre, that would increase to 159 trips. But the key figure is the uplift, the difference between the two figures, which is 92 trips. 92, that's 46 in, 46 out. So that's number of vehicles as a result of the development that are generated in the worst period. So that will help you feel more confident about the current arrangements.
If I may help committee, the highway engineer said 3 keywords: road safety audit. So there are concerns regarding highway and pedestrian safety. Effectively what the highway engineer is saying is that the section 278 highway works in this case will be of a level they will require road safety audit. So what members may wish to do is include in the header term that there should definitely be a road safety audit. And that would hopefully then give more comfort to everyone concerned on road safety matters.
Right, I've got Councillor Hagger and Councillor Morgan held. I've got Councillor Duncan held in my head, and then I'm going to need to start to draw this to a close. Councillor Hagger, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree. Definitely welcome a leisure centre. It is a good place for it. I've just got a couple of concerns. I'm really pleased you addressed the front of it, and that hopefully we can put a condition in there, change of colour. One of them is, what conditions have we actually got around the construction traffic coming in?
Management plan.
I'm very concerned with the school coming in and out.
25.
Right, could you just explain that to me, please?
Well, if you look at condition 25 on page 20, it gives a full list of the things a construction management plan has to include.
It doesn't actually say anything, unless I'm missing it, it doesn't actually say anything about the schools, though, coming in and out, unless I'm being a little bit...
Well, schools, what, coming in and out to where?
So when the schools finish and they come in and out, would that be inclusive in any of this, or not really?
Not.
Yeah, okay.
There will be... Go on.
Thank you, Chairman. A construction logistics, construction management plan requires the developer to set out the number of vehicles that will be generated while they build the leisure centre, that there's sufficient room on site for those vehicles to park, and then the routes they will take. And with regards to your question, when will they arrive and when will they leave? The construction management plan would be put before my colleagues, and we would make the point that we don't want vehicles coinciding with the arrival and departure times at schools. And that would also pick up the petitioner's concerns about meth on the highway. We would require the developer to engage with road sweepers and wheel washing and all those sort of methods to stop debris on the highway, which the Highway Authority no one wants.
Thank you, Alan. That's comprehensive. Councillor Morgan and then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, in general, this looks a pretty good report here, but there are a few items that I think we do need to have a look at. First of all, children's safety, especially if they're being dropped off by the coach. They're then expected to walk either along the road and then across a crossing to get into the leisure facilities before. As the petitioner rightly said, that if it's chucking it down with rain, trying to keep hold of 20, 30 children from running to be in the dry is difficult at the best of times. And then you'll have the residents coming out of Rowley Place suddenly having to put the anchors on because 15, 20 children suddenly run across the road in front of them. So I do think safety-wise we do have to look at that. Going on from that, the build out at Rowley Place to stop traffic from going further into the residential area. Surely, if that's built to such an extent, emergency vehicles of refuse vehicles will not be able to access the area, in which case it's going to cause problems. Also, removal vehicles and anything like that. You know, if we build that out too much, it's going to cause a problem. But if we don't build it out far enough, it's not going to act as a deterrent. And the last one is the floodlight. Oh, sorry, I've got two more points. Floodlight issue. We've mentioned briefly about what we're looking for, but I know from first hand that when you have the floodlights, keeping the area safe, that 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, you have light pollution going across not just your own area that you want, but far exceeding that area. So it could well be into the back gardens of Rowley Place and onto the main road, Harmondsworth Road. So I think we do need to check those out, please, and have conditions in so that will not happen. And finally, the noise from the gym itself. When people are using the free weights and they're dropping them onto the floor, it does make a racket. Again, have we got enough soundproofing to make sure that that sound does not cause noise pollution for the local residents? Thank you.
I think we've dealt with floodlighting. I think the road safety audit will pick up your point about the children. Bear in mind they will be dropped off by coaches generally at our schools and under supervision. And I see them dropped at Highgrove regularly. And I must admit, I don't see masses of children running, regardless of whether they are normally very well controlled by the number of adults that are with them. External noise, there is condition 28 on external noise. Does that pick up the councillor's point?
If I can take that. Now, the gym is enclosed and at first floor level. I don't anticipate that would be the main noise source from this. I believe it would be the external condensers and air conditioning units, and that's what condition 28 seeks to...
But we are saying that you've got to keep to a certain level above background noise level. Yeah. So if the weights do take it above that, then yeah. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. Councillor Duncan, I think you were the last on this for now.
Yeah, thank you. Would that also include noise from the football pitch as well?
It would include noise from the football pitch, because that's the furthest away from Rowley's Place. Yeah. I know that there are residents on Dell Road. It would the condition would pick up the noise sources from both.
So it needs to be expanded, because at the moment it says plant, machinery and equipment, not humans.
Okay, yeah.
So anyway, if that could just be expanded to include those issues. The thing I wanted to speak about was, thank you, Zainab, for pointing out that there is this difference in levels. But can I just stand up and show what I think was wanting to be considered?
Okay. Are they on the right plan? I don't think they are.
No, we need a right plan.
Nowhere near it.
Yeah, I think there's a drop of about 2 metres, something like that here. I think the proposal was, can't we have this coming in here? Because this is going to be 2 floors anyway. It's going to be the ground floor, which is, down here, and then you're going to have another floor. It's proposing to come in down Rowley's and then come in at that ground floor. But you could easily come in at this level. And so you're coming in at the first floor level, and then you just walk down or go down to the floor below. I think that was something that...
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I mean, that's a different application. That's way beyond anything we can do via planning conditions or anything. And you may not like this answer, but so officers are happy that the scheme as submitted is acceptable, and that's the stumbling block, I think, here, insofar as I am trying to help with some of the conditions and stuff, but that's quite a big change to the scheme, and I think my answer to the committee would be we don't consider there's any grounds to refuse the scheme as submitted.
Thank you. Yes, I do understand that, but I just wanted to carry forward that point which had been suggested by the residents, and I don't know if that had been raised in the consultations, and so you considered that, right? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, if I can summarise where I think we are, and no doubt if I get any hands that will correct where I think we are. The Head of Planning asked at the start of this process delegated authority to amend Head of Term 6 in relation to the S106 to make sure the basement condition, the basement element of that was robust. We are looking to have the words road safety audit added into the highway work section of that S106. There needs to be a condition added by the Head of Planning in respect of lighting to ensure it is switched off automatically. We also wanted, the Head of Planning was going to look at the wording of condition 20 to ensure that the green walls section of that was robust. So
there is a conditional green walls and roofs, but as I understand it, it's the elevation facing the residents that doesn't have lots of window openings for obvious reasons, but that results in a quite blank elevation, and so whether that could have green walls along it. So we alter the condition to effectively make it clear there should be green walls. Green wall in
which
effect,
would then improve the overall look of that
and then,
side.
That wouldn't preclude in that reason any other part of the building that could be.
Well, condition 6 already requires final details because officers are seeking that the final pallet is not the one that you see before you, to put it mildly. So officers are seeking there's a final details of final materials to come in anyway. The Head of Planning is proposing to strengthen condition 20 to ensure that blank wall we see is not what we see today.
So what you're after is a substantial green wall on the elevation facing the neighbours.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is if they can add any other bits of green wall, don't word it such that it precludes that.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's specifically for that western elevation as previously proposed, which I think we agree. But if there's any other part that can be, and that would fit in with climate change policies, etc. as well, wouldn't it?
Acknowledged, but I think that wall in particular we want to definitely reference.
Could I just ask, you referred to recommendation 6 in the 106.
Yep.
But I thought we were going to tighten up the flood.
That was we delegated Head of Planning to tighten that up.
Yes.
That's what I want done.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm not going to try and get into the wording now, but he would like the authority to do that, and I think that's a sensible thing to agree. Councillor Morse, have you got one final point before I move this?
It just struck me that what seems to be coming from members is concerned about the traffic issue here. Is it possible that we could delegate to the Head of Planning to review the traffic access to this site? I mean, is that within our potential powers?
I have a feeling we're outside them, but the Head of Planning will confirm to me in a moment.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to help with the areas I think is easy to help, but that's quite a big it's quite a big change to the scheme potentially. It's what we would sometimes say tantamount to a different application, basically. I think the point where residents can be helped is the petition being carried over to deal with the parking, which I think you mentioned at the...
And also, yes, that's already been, that bit, and also I think the road safety audit to ensure that this proposed access, which, as the highways officer indicated, needs final design and checking, that the road safety audit then doesn't turn up anything that means that this doesn't work in the way it's intended. And I think that gives us the comfort. Unfortunately, in other matters, one of the requirements of the planning world, and it doesn't matter whether it's a scheme that the council itself may be involved in or other developers, is you have to consider the scheme that is before you. You can't rewrite a scheme to be what you... in other ways, you can add conditions, you can add terms, you can't tear up a set of plans. Not a power we've been given, and not a power I'm asking for either. I think there's broad agreement, subject to all of the changes and the addendum, to move this forward. Amanda? 20? Yes, okay. Could you, yeah, so condition 28 to be amended to ensure it reflects internal noise as well as external noise, which I think is a sensible suggestion from the councillor. Yeah, so internal and external, yeah, so what's going on in the building as opposed to just the materials, because some of the activities in the building could also add some noise. Right, can somebody take this forward for me? Councillor Tucker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thank you for summarising those points of the debate this evening. I think everybody around the table is welcoming of this scheme, and I'd like to move officer's recommendation.
As we've amended in several places. Councillor Goddard.
Yeah.
Thank you. All those in favour, please clearly show me. Thank you. Unanimously passed. Thank you very much indeed. Right, I'll now move to item 7, which is TCM House, Newport Road, Hayes. I don't know whether the last group at the back's got an interest in that or something else tonight, but we'll find out in a moment when they leave us. Okay, who's the presenter on this one? Is it Madam? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
This may be more straightforward.
If members could please note that there is an addendum on this item. The addendum is not housekeeping. We are proposing that the recommendation changes from approval to approval plus a Section 106 legal agreement. The terms have been set out for the legal agreement, and that's primarily that the applicant enters into a nominations agreement with the London Borough of Hillingdon to provide the type of accommodation that's proposed. There is a summary of air quality comments that we also have now received. If I take you through the proposal, the application site is located on Newport Road, which is just off Uxbridge Road. So this is the main Uxbridge Road, and Newport Road runs off it. It is a cul-de-sac. The application site is outlined in red and has no designations per se, so it's clear white land. It is a current employment site, so we have had specific comments from policy who have raised concerns about the loss of employment because there are policies that protect employment uses. We are, however, looking at a scheme which is quite unique in that it's proposing a residential hostel, which is a sui generis use. It's not C3 residential accommodation. And the reason for the proposed hostel is to accommodate homeless families and people for a temporary period only. The development would assist in providing accommodation for the council's housing team for temporary periods and reducing dependence on other forms of temporary accommodation such as bed and breakfast. So just to clarify, this is not for C3 residential development, and the reason that is important to note is that because although the layout might look like a standard residential accommodation unit whereby there are 2 beds, 3 beds, probably not, and studio accommodation, they do not comply with the floor space standards of the National Technical Guidance, but because it's temporary accommodation, it doesn't need to. The proposal, as I mentioned, does result in the loss of non-designated industrial land, but the temporary residential accommodation, or the hostel, has an identified need, and then that's considered to outweigh the harm and the potential loss of the non-designated industrial land. So on balance, having regard to the development plan and all other material planning considerations, the development has been deemed to be acceptable. Whilst not strictly in accordance, we do have the head of term as well as planning restrictions to try and ensure that this does not become residential accommodation, which otherwise would be deemed to be unacceptable because of shortfalls in amenity space and also because of the loss of the employment land. The area is currently characterised by a mix of uses, including offices, some storage facilities, and then some retail. So I'll take you through the application site. So this is the site layout, the block and the site plan. So just down here you can see there's a small gap, but that's a service access to serve the residential units which are located here on the Uxbridge Road. This site is has consent for prior approval from office to residential, and we did recently refuse a scheme on that site. These are primarily commercial, and this development is residential. If I take you through a comparison diagram of the existing and the proposed, the red dotted line denotes the areas of built form as existing, and then the grey outlines the proposed built form in simple footprint terms. This is the existing uses and the existing elevations which are on site, so they are primarily part single storey and then a part 3-storey building. These are the proposed ground and first floor plans, so the residential access will be from Newport Road along the front of the site. There are better site plans than this, and then the accommodation stretches across the development in a T-shape. There are some cutbacks here to minimise the built form, and these are the proposed elevations which show that the top floor has been set back. If I take you to, I'm not sure if you can see it very clearly, but the red dotted line does denote what the existing built form is like. So the proposed height is not exceeding significantly the proposed height of the existing height of the built form. We'll take you through to some photographs. So these are the adjoining sites that I mentioned at the end of Newport Road, so the existing commercial facilities. So where you can see the signage here, this is the existing building that will be knocked down and rebuilt. So this is the commercial facility located to the north, and if I can take you, this is the residential property across the road, and there, and this is the front elevation. So this is the part single storey section of the existing site. Again, more commercial facilities. The site directly next door to the development, there is a photo of it coming up, here we go, is a ground floor commercial premises with some residential accommodation on the upper floor levels. You can see that there are habitable room windows on the upper floors, but we have fully investigated, and one of them is a non-habitable room. The second window serves as a dual aspect room, therefore it has a window on the front as well as the window on the side, and therefore it's not deemed to have an unacceptable impact in terms of amenity. The application has been recommended for approval, but as I have just mentioned, it is subject to the addendum which proposes a legal agreement for the development. Thank you.
So just to clarify, there is a children's play area, and the shortfall in internal space standards, they are actually very marginal. So whereas you normally have a minimum 74 square metres for a 3-bed unit, these are 70 to 72. So and it's set out in detail on pages 100 and 101 that it's very close to well, actually most units are compliant, but those that aren't are actually very close to. But it is set out in detail, the details in that regard in paragraph 7.09. But it's just the point that I wanted to make, that the shortfalls are marginal in this case, and obviously it's specialist accommodation. It is not standard C3, and so obviously everyone's tried to make it as compliant as possible, and it is very close. Thank you, Chairman.
Who wants to start me off on this one? Anybody? Councillor Tackwell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like this scheme. I think it's got a lot of merit. I think it provides a facility to help people in the community. There are some trade-offs with it, and I think they're wholly acceptable in terms of the space and amenity. So I'm happy with this scheme.
Councillor Duncan, then Councillor Morse. I have to see that. It's that red jacket gets me first, you see.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do have concerns about this, because we all know that people go into temporary accommodation and they stay there for 10 years. I've got several residents, well, quite a lot of families actually, who've been in temporary accommodation for unacceptable lengths of time. And so I'm interested to hear how far short this falls. And it is, I suppose, not within the standards that we would require for permanent occupation, but make no bones about it, these people are not going to be here for 6 weeks. They're going to be here for a lot longer, and we all need to know that and to sign up to that and accept that. Having said that, we all know the desperate need for accommodation that there is. But my other concern, which I'm afraid will mean that I'm not voting for this, is that it's in not only an air quality management area, I think much of the borough is, but it's in an air quality focus area, which means that we should not be doing anything in terms of putting human beings into that situation until we're improving it. Now, I mean, we could say that, yes, perhaps we are improving it by putting people to live in there and there won't be commercial activity going on, but there will still be traffic, there will still be people living and trying to breathe in this. But if officers can help me with this, I would like to be helped. Thank you.
I'm only going to speak briefly. The reason why I particularly wanted to come in after Mandip is because what this is all about is providing better quality temporary accommodation. And there is a couple of frank points in the report that refers to, the reference is given to bed and breakfast. Let's be honest, we know there are people that get placed in bed and breakfast. So this is about providing something that is genuinely better than people are currently in. Now, the honest answer is I don't really know the full details in terms of your question, in terms of timescales, but what I do know is that this is all about better quality accommodation. And it's on that ground alone that I'd be encouraging members to vote and approve it.
Thank you, James. Thank you. I mean, I'm sure this is going to be a lot better than some of the places that, quite frankly, I've been horrified to walk into and people have been living in them. But it does mean that we are accepting a lower standard for people to live in, and I know it's not planning's remit, but it is ours as councillors. We deal with these people every day in our surgeries and casework that comes to us, people who are homeless, people who are put into temporary accommodation, and because there is simply a shortfall of enough permanent accommodation to meet the needs, it just means those people have to be kept in temporary accommodation for a lot longer. I mean, I feel very divided about this, but in the end it was the air quality, I think, that... And
your views on air quality are consistent and well known.
Yeah.
Councillor Morse.
Well, I welcome the bluntness of the report. It makes it quite clear this is not normal C3 standard accommodation. But I do take the view that this is a step forward in the sense that we are trying to give some sort of better temporary accommodation. There are other issues who uses the amenity space, but overall, I mean, I'm agreeing with Councillor Duncan that I don't like the air quality, but I'm afraid to say I will vote for it because I think this is a reasonable proposition.
I have sort of a comment that might help, I don't know. I'm going to be blunt again. Obviously, a lot of demand for this is going to come from people within the air quality management area. So if the alternative is to site this outside the air quality management area, you're actually going to... there are disbenefits that inherently come with that.
It is a trade-off. I think we all know that. And as I say, Councillor Duncan, this wouldn't be the only scheme Councillor Duncan has voted against on air quality grounds. So that's why I understand that. Councillor Morgan, I think I'll
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've just got a question that I know cannot be answered here this evening, but how long is temporary?
Duncan may have partially answered your question, even though she didn't know you were going to ask it.
Because going on from that, what I then have concerns about is if somebody's in that accommodation for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, that they then start complaining about the noise, the fumes, and everything from the industrial units that's around them. And next minute is we're then putting conditions on those industrial units and forcing them to close. In which case, is there anything that we can do to protect those industrial units, similar to what we did a few years ago along the canal, that's protected the chandlers so that the residential units that were built did not compromise the chandlers that were working?
Well, when the application first came in, there was side windows. So if you may see, it's sort of a T shape. So if you imagine the bottom left and bottom right of the T, when this application came in, there was windows in those elevations. We got them all taken out because we specifically didn't want this to prejudice adjoining land. So the only side windows are in the back T bit where there's some distance off the boundary. So it was kind of picked up through the application process. One of the problems with this immediate area is it's actually become quite mixed in any case. There is a mixture of employment.
If you know the area, and I recognise it from visits, it is a very mixed corner. There's residential very close to current industrial uses already. I mean, there's...
I'm sorry, I'm going to twice not answer a specific question, but I think there's a danger that we're planning and transport experts rather than housing experts. And the bit about the duration, I think I have an idea, but I might...
I think Councillor Duncan's already alluded to the fact these people may not be there very short term. I think we get that. I don't think there's a lot more we can do with the industrial. I think we know what it is, but there is already a lot of housing in and around it already. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Tuckwell, will you...
Yeah, on the basis of the debate, you're happy to move officer's recommendation.
Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Morse. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That one's unanimously approved. Oh, sorry, my fault. I was... Yes, you're voting against. Yeah, my fault. I was too quick there. And forgetting. Right, item 8. I'm conscious of timing. And we've got a lot to get through yet. Item 8 is relatively straightforward, and I'm wondering whether members want a presentation. I would draw members' attention to the addendum, because the applicant has asked for increased lorry movements, and we've taken the opportunity to ask for low emission vehicles, which we couldn't have done on the existing reasonably. So do members want a presentation on it on the basis of what it is, or are you happy to take it on that basis? I'm happy to take it on that basis. Yep. Okay. Can someone give me a proposal? Will you? Councillor Duncan will propose. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Goddard. All those in favour, please show me. Thank you. That one is unanimous. Got that one right. Right. I'm now going to take item 10 before item 9. There is a logical reason for that. Item 10 relates to the new developments on the site. Item 9 is the retention of some existing accommodation. So if we don't like 10, we're going to have a bit of a problem with 9. So, Zainab, will you take us through Northwood College, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members might be familiar with this site. It was here last year, and the application is for... so this application site is within it's Northwood College, within the Northwood Town Centre and Green Lane Conservation Area. The proposal seeks to provide a 3-storey building within the existing car park on Maxwell Road between Ray Lodge and West Wing of the old building. Following the determination in 2019, the applicant has engaged in extensive pre-application discussion, and following the discussion, officers believe that the revised scheme provides a 3-storey science block, which is an approvable scheme. The height of the building has been reduced. The glazed link at first floor level is removed, and these were the most significant concerns in the previous application, and they no longer form part of this application. Also, as part of the works, extensive boundary treatment and improvements to the boundary are proposed, and it also includes reconfiguration of the car park in front of Vincent House so that there's only a net loss of 7 car parking spaces. This is far less than the 25 spaces that was previously accepted in the old application. Although the conservation considers there is less than substantial harm to the character and appearance of the area due to the scale and siting of the building, this is the minimum required to deliver the science curriculum at Northwood School. So on that basis, officers accept that the public benefits identified by this scheme outweigh the harm, and I'll just take you through the presentation. So this is, you will remember, this is the car park, and this is where it's proposed to be sited. This is the new block. So the key change is previously there was a glazed link at first floor level to allow girls to go into a toilet block within the old building. This has now been located, and you can see that it's set back from the front elevation of the building by about 5 metres, and this is already set back from the road. There is also a level drop, quite a considerable level drop between the entrance of the site and the school itself. It is about 1.5 to 2 metres, so this will be its impact is limited, and there is now a greater appreciation of that gap between the two buildings. So these are the floor plans. You'll also see that there is a green roof above that block. And this is the amended elevation. So there is a plant room there, but it's only 3 stories. Previously it was 4 stories. And there is very minimal, there is a difference now, and the height is more akin and in keeping with what is there. This is the rear elevation, and this is the link between the proposed science block and the hall building to the rear. So overall, this is a huge improvement, and I will show you. This is what was previously approved. Refused. And following our discussion, this is the change that has been made. So we think that this is a far more muted and sympathetic scheme within the conservation area. It delivers the science curriculum for Northwood School. Most importantly, it will get rid of what I come on to, which is item agenda 9. So these are pictures. So this is where the new block will be sited, but it will be nowhere near as high as it was previously proposed. And you'll also notice, one thing I didn't really touch on was the materiality. This is more in keeping, it's more sympathetic to the character of the conservation area. It includes quite a lot of detail on the design, and that then celebrates the entrance, which we think is a very a good high quality design. So this will get rid of the item 10, which is a temporary science block that is currently occupying the playing field, and by September 2023, item 9, this will be removed. So on this basis, there is a addendum, so I'd like to draw your attention to the addendum for items 9 and 10. Item 9, the applicant requested a change to the conditions, so it was clear that within 3 months of the temporary permission expiring, the playing field will be reinstated to a level that's acceptable to Sport England, and there are some changes, amendments to the wording of the conditions, and most importantly, section 07.3 of the report. It's just to clarify that we do believe that the benefits of this proposal outweigh the harm to the conservation area this time round. Finally, in terms of the temporary building, the reason it's September 2023, we think it's a realistic time scale to build, if approved, to build out number 10. The applicant has said that the programme for the construction will run to early 2023, but by allowing them time until September 2023 instead of January 2023 would mean that they have that, they're not going to come back and say, can I have another 9 months or 10 months? So on that basis, the recommendation is for approval, subject to section 106. I'll take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I mean, to me, a much improved scheme from the one that was refused previously, and I think has addressed the concerns. So let's take members' views. Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if officers can please help me in terms of the reduction in size of this scheme from the proposals which were refused, because we were previously looking at 4 stories. We're told that it's a reduction of 28% of the usable floor space, and this is not a property development play, so we're not talking about a developer's profit. Presumably there were some serious reasons why the additional floor space was originally sought, and I wonder if officers have been able to ascertain how the school will manage without this reduced facility.
It's a very simple answer. So that top story on the scheme that was refused was the 6th form, and then below it was the science block. We've just got the science now. So what happened is that after the last refusal, we asked the school to look at their entire estate, and they did find a way of relocating the 6th form in a different part of the campus. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got a plan pinpointing it, but we have.
this is the pavilion building, and the sixth form accommodation is now being located to this part, and we have a current application in which seeks material enhancements to this pavilion building so that it works better for the school and their needs, and we think that's an acceptable solution. So on that, that's the reason.
I just ask a supplemental on that, though. I mean, presumably it still must mean that there is some concession, some compromise being made by the school in order to squeeze this in. I mean, they are still losing something by it, are they not?
I mean, there's this particular proposal to go from the refusal to the current approval. There has been compromised by the school, but the school has a board and it has all its own governance arrangements, and the applicant has reached a point where this is their application, and they've addressed our concerns as officers. They're obviously looking to proceed, and I know, we seem to have reached a point where we think everyone's happy. So this basically just needs committee endorsement now.
Councillor Morgan, then Councillor Duncan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I was just going to suggest we go with the officer's recommendation.
I'll take that, but I'll hold it just to say what my colleagues over here have to say.
Yeah.
Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's a considerable improvement. I'm glad that the college has been able to look at the allocation of space. I'm happy to second this. Thank you.
I'll just hear Councillor Moores before I put that to the vote.
I would compliment officers from holding their position which they had in the original development. I think this is vastly superior. I accept the fact there's a marginal problem for the school when it chooses its capacity, but I think this is absolutely fine development, and I think the planning department deserves some compliment.
There you go. That is a good result. Okay, we are proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show me. Thank you. That one's unanimously approved. Can I also take the same proposals and seconders for item 9? And can I go to a vote on that as well, please? That one is again unanimously approved. We now, with good timing, move to item 11. And I do spot a couple of ward councillors in the room, and I'll bring you in a moment. Some bright spark did say to me before we started this that we were deferring things for which the time hadn't yet come. But we clearly did defer this in November 2019, not November 2020. And that wasn't me. I didn't spot that. Others did. Right. This is a bit of an unusual one. This is a council scheme. It was deferred by this committee with some concerns. We've actually now come back with a revised scheme, which it would appear has addressed the concerns both of residents and members. And unless ward councillors are going to tell me something very different, I would hope they're not. But perhaps, Mandip, you take us through the new scheme.
Thank you.
Or the revisions to the scheme to make it more acceptable.
So this was an application for land adjoining Whiteheath Junior School. We have been through the proposal, so we've been here before, we've been on site. The application previously proposed 4 residential units. There were concerns about dormer windows, there were concerns about proximity, and also the accuracy of plans in relation to the property at number 1, which joins the site. I can confirm that we now have accurate plans of the extension, which was not shown on the previous plan, at ground floor level for number 1, and therefore we're confident that there is no breach of daylight and sunlight to the residents at number 1. Previously, this building was set back so that the front was approximately where the rear is now, so we have shifted this entire building to be better aligned with the existing units at number 1 and 3. Previously, we were proposing 4 residential units on this site. We have now scaled that back to be more proportionate, and we are proposing only 2 residential units on the site with their own dedicated car parking spaces. We also had concerns in the past about the quality of the amenity space that was proposed for those 4 residential units, primarily because of the quantum of trees that we were proposing to retain on the site. That has now gone away as a result of only having 2 residential gardens. We still are able to retain a large quantity of the trees, but we are removing some centrally in order to get a decent back garden for House B, as shown on the site plan. Another part of the proposals, which is also new, relates to a proposed ecological area. So I want to otherwise call it a no-build zone. So we're seeking that the development will propose ecological enhancements as a result of the schemes that are coming forward. If I take you through the plan, so this was the existing plan, so the built form was in these locations, and that has all now been removed, and we would have seen a cleared site when we went on our site visit. This is the proposed ground floor plan for proposed house A, and this is the proposed plans for house B. The primary difference between house A and house B is that there is a oriel window. I was about to call it a louvered window, but that's not right. An oriel window. So what we're trying to do is prevent views from this property out onto the school playing field. So this is a blank window, and the only view out of this bedroom window will be away from the school playing fields to protect the amenity of the school children. Accordingly, this is the design of the front elevation, so it's more in keeping with the street. I appreciate that the street is predominantly semi-detached properties. However, these will be more akin to what is proposed what exists along the main street scene. I take you through some of the photographs. They are predominantly what we have seen in the past. So this is the application site. You'll note that this is the ground floor extension that we saw on site that was previously not on the existing plans but is now shown, and there would be no impact on the daylight and sunlight. This is the existing garage at number 1, which would be retained when it's outside of the application site. This is what would be the proposed rear garden, the front entrance into the development site. Sorry that there are some blank screens. This is the front elevation of the site. So we would have a new vehicular access here, but we have had no objection raised about the root protection area for this substantial tree, there is no intention for that to be lost. Where are we? More visuals of the existing property, and that is property identified as number 1, so directly adjacent to the application site. The application is recommended for approval.
Ward councillors looking to speak, I think. Councillor Riley, are you looking? Is it you? I'm assuming it is. I don't know. Unless your colleague can't speak, if I remember rightly. Just for completeness, can we? You need to record a declaration of interest, don't you, councillor? Yeah. Thank you. I know you're not intending to speak, but for completeness, you're in the room, and therefore I need to make sure that's in the record. Thank you, Councillor Riley. Sorry to... Go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you know, good evening, members of the committee. As you know, Councillor Cawthorne has submitted some written observations, and perhaps you'll read those out, or I can when I've finished speaking. But this original proposition was extremely controversial with regard to the residents of Whiteheath Avenue, and they were deeply concerned about the nature and the extent of the original plan. But this is a plan much more in keeping with the road itself, and is, putting it bluntly, more like an extension of that side of the road in any event, which is to a large extent what we were talking about with residents at a very early stage. If it wasn't an area that could have been retained entirely for amenity, then the least worst option was, and I seem to remember someone saying, a couple of similar types of houses that are in the same road. But what we do welcome very much is this ecological area at the back of the property, which, as I understand it, will not be sold as part of the land package, but will be retained by the council, hopefully, and then at some point perhaps would be able to be run by the school, or taken over by the school for ecological purposes and educational purposes, which will make the residents extremely happy, because many, many years ago, in fact during the course of my original election campaign, that area of land was still as it was, and was being spoken about way back then as being potentially an area of land that was going to be used for amenity or for educational purposes. So the fact that we've come this far and we've got some of it for that purpose is excellent, and I know that many of our residents are very pleased with that. So hopefully that's what will happen to that land at the back. but this is a vast improvement on what there was there before, which really was completely out of character. It's, of course, you've got both schools, as it were, on that corner, with Whiteheath Infants a little bit further down. The congestion in the mornings is extraordinary, and I've often been asked to go down and sort out certain differences of opinion between people parking across residents' driveways and so forth. Why people think I'm able to sort out differences of opinion in that way is another issue. But we're very grateful, and we think this is a very good plan, and I know residents will be very happy with what's been proposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I do indeed, of course, have Councillor Cawthorne's comments sitting before me, which I did agree to read as he can't be with us. And they say, these proposals have emerged more quickly than I was given to understand, and some residents have expressed concern that has afforded them little opportunity to comment. I have previously advised residents questioned whether they prefer to see an alternative use for the site are not in themselves planning considerations, which are the only basis upon which the Planning Committee can determine an application. I believe the revised proposals broadly reflect the concerns raised in the previous application about overdevelopment and the design aspects of the current proposals. Notably, the removal of dormers better reflect the existing street scene. It allows for improved access, and a smaller number of dwellings with compliant parking will be a better fit in a residential street which suffers from acute parking stress and associated highways issues. The ecology area which the report indicates will be used by Whiteheath Junior School is something which I would welcome. Overall, the planning balance of the new scheme is one that works better, and I can see no sustainable planning objections. That's quite helpful. So I think two ward councillors seem reasonably content with what is before us, so thank you for your contributions. Members, please. Councillor Tuckwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember the site visit, actually.
Yeah, cold and wet.
Very cold and wet that day, if I recall. Three things for me, really. I really welcome the amendments. It's addressed all of our concerns. The second point is, albeit only two, it's two much needed new family homes, which we could always do with. And the ecology area I warmly welcome, and I like the idea of making it available to the school to help with education, but whether that develops in the fullness of time, so I think on that basis I'd be happy to move officer's recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, happy to second, thank you.
No other hands are moving, so I'm taking everybody else is comfortable. All those in favour, please show me. Thank you very much, that one's approved. Right. I now move to the former Chancery School, site Falling Lane, Useley. Zenab, I think you're moving to present this one.
Thank you, Chair. So, right, item 12 is former Chancery School site in Useley. So, just to show you, this is the site location plan, and the existing school is located here. This is the footprint of the existing school. These are all temporary classrooms, or they're sort of housed in temporary porter cabin type buildings, and this is their current refuse and recycling area, and then this is their car park. The application proposal seeks full planning permission for the demolition of the existing school and the erection of a two-storey building to facilitate the expansion and co-location of the Young People's Academy and the Young People's Hub. The new building would be provided within the playing field, and this is the playing field to the north, which is located to the north of the existing site. Once the construction of the new school is complete, the existing school would be demolished on the southern part of the site, and this would be resurfaced to provide an all-weather pitch and a multi-use game area with a reconfigured car park, cycle parking, refuse store, and ancillary boundary treatment. The proposal would enable the expansion of special educational needs provision and alternative provision in the borough, for which there is a pressing and identified need. As noted within the officer's report, mainstream schools have been expanded in the recent years. However, there is a documented need for the expansion of schools that cater for young people and children that have more complex needs. Whilst the proposal would result in the loss of a playing field, the provision of alternative sporting facilities and recreational facilities that I'll take you through in a moment would be sufficient for benefit for both the school and the community. The need for this school provision is sufficiently acute to outweigh other material considerations, and it's on this basis that we recommend approval. So I'm just going to take you through the proposal. This gives you a clearer idea of where we are, and this is Rabs Farm Primary School. The access is off Falling Lane. There is a private road that is gated for the benefit of the school. There is a separate pedestrian pathway as well that leads into the school. So this is the existing site. Look, this is a proposed site plan, but because of the scale of the plan, it's probably not showing very clearly. But just to talk you through it, this is Falling Lane to the south. There's the access route going into the site. This is the area of reconfigured car park. This is the all-weather pitch and the multi-use game area. This is the footprint of the new school on the former playing field, and around the perimeter of the school you'll see that there are what is called sensory gardens, and these are recreational areas designed to meet the specific and very complex needs of the students that will be attending this site. It's also because of the nature of the needs and the pupils that will be using this school site, there is dedicated minibus parking area. The car parking layout has been configured so there is one-way movement in and out of the site for the minibuses, and because they will be arriving mostly by minibuses and specific transport, they will be arriving at off-peak times, so they will not, Falling Lane is also used, this junction at Gordon Road, by Rabs Farm, but it won't conflict with that movement coming in and out of the site because they will be arriving earlier and there'll be staggered start and finish times. They'll also be leaving earlier. So just here are the floor plans. This shows two entrances into the site. It also shows that there will be a central space that they can share if necessary, although they will be operating as two independent schools. And the area around the school site shows where the sensory garden would be located. First floor plan, the roof plan, and this is the existing elevation, and these are the proposed elevations. They are going to be constructed of prefabricated sort of modular buildings, but nevertheless they've made some attempt, and they will have a fairly utilitarian appearance, but it has been designed with the needs of the specific users in mind. There are very specific needs, and that has been all taken into account, and that's why the design is as it is. And then these are this shows the massing diagram of the proposed building. We have considered amenity on neighbouring residents, and it is considered that it would not impact neighbouring residents. And because of the site constraints and the layout of the existing roads, the proposal is like it had done for Rabs Farm Primary School redevelopment, to take construction through Philpotts Farm. There is a separate licence in place with the council, and the proposal is for the construction of a temporary haul road to allow the construction of the site. It's anticipated this will take around 2 years to complete. These are CGIs. The recommendation is for approval subject to referral to the Secretary of State, because there is a standing objection from Sport England. I think that will wraps up the presentation, and I'll take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
The Head of Planning wants to just come in.
Comment. Possibly one of the most important bits of condition as a typo, so I thought I'll correct the typo and draw your attention to what I consider a bit of condition that really would help members. So in an earlier item we picked up that if you've got a bit of wall that could do with a visual improvement, you could add a living wall to it. So page 241, there is some sections of slightly bland elevation which officers had already conditioned under So it's point 3, about 10 lines down, page 241. It should say details of the inclusion of living walls and roofs that, rather than hat, include nectar-rich planting on 2 or more elevations. So I just wanted to highlight that because it's actually a quite important point that would potentially address possible concerns members might have. That said, this is a really important scheme in terms of addressing SEN provision in the borough, so that's the really important point to stress with this proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
And while we're looking at that page, there is an addendum on this item to specify the cycle storage just before anybody asks me where it is. This one, Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. There's absolutely a crying need for this. I think any of us who have any involvement in any school know how desperately this is needed. I'm very, very happy to see these plans. I just wondered if there was anything relating to flooding, because this goes at the back, it goes down to the River Pin, and if you remember, that area floods and it's in a flood. The pin is just at the back of this, within the green belt. So,
okay. Thank you. Val?
So this has been addressed. Our colleagues in the flood water management team have looked at this proposal and they've specified a very bespoke condition. Before any commencement begins on site, they will be required to satisfy the flood water management officer that all the drainage issues are, dealt with before development begins. Yeah.
That's condition 14, which takes most of a page to explain.
That was the point I was going to highlight. My concerns about this were the water drainage, and I looked at condition 14, I read all the way through it, and it seems very thorough, Mr Chairman, so my view is we can support this much. Well, the needs are obviously demonstrated.
Yeah, I think we all acknowledge that. Someone therefore give me a prototype before, Councillor Morgan.
If Councillor Morse has proposed it, I will second it.
Yeah, okay. On that basis, all those in favour, please show me. Thank you very much. That one's approved. The last one on your list tonight is an out-of-borough consultation from Slough, which the Planning Department would like your approval to object to. I think the reasons are clearly given at the bottom of page 289. It's a replacement facility clearly linked to Heathrow expansion, which now has some difficulties following the latest High Court ruling. Are we happy to support officers' recommendation that register this approval with Slough? Councillor Goddard? Yeah. All those in favour, please show me. Thank you very much. Thank you for your hard work on that lot.
Could I just ask for one matter? Previously, we have asked, because we have Section 106 reports come to us from time to time for noting, I have asked on 2 previous occasions if we can have SIL reports. I'm told that there is no problem with this. The SIL would be in the same kind of format that Section 106 reports are now. And if that could be minuted, please, I would appreciate it.
I'll leave that to the head of planning to investigate, unless there's a reason why not.
We can definitely bring a SIL report to this committee. I think. I won't get drawn into format, but we'll. Okay. If we can bring a SIL report, then we'll take it from there.
I've spoken with the officer concerned, and it's possible to have, because obviously SIL is results from different developments. So just as Section 106 details that, so the SIL report can. I understand that it can be spent anywhere in the borough, like, for example, improvements to parks and amenity areas. So obviously that's going to be spread over different areas, and that's not going to be just in one ward. But otherwise, I understand from the officers that there isn't a difficulty with that, so I would like that to come to committee.
I think request noted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all indeed for your time.
Thank you.